What up, people? This is how I master my beats. Let's get right in it. Bam! So basically the mastering process, you can just think of it as enhancing the audio quality and just preparing the track for distribution and just getting it ready for the audience to listen, like a perfect track. So it's not really as such the mixing part. The mixing part is really where you get tactical and just really want to affect the sounds the best way possible, like each individual sound. The mastering process, you shouldn't really do that much like sound shaping, sound designing, so to speak. You really just want to like make sure it's polished and sounds perfect, you know, radio ready, as a lot of people say. So with that being said, just wanted to identify that there are two different spaces, the mixing space and the mastering space. With that being said, you kind of want to make sure that your track is mixed the way that you want it mixed. If you do that yourself, or if you hire someone, or however you may want to mix your track, and also especially leveled. You really want to make sure the sounds are leveled in your mix. But yeah, and that just means that they're at the appropriate peaks in terms of decibels, so one sound isn't sounding like off in the mix. If you do reference tracks, it'll help a lot just to get those levels right. Now, what I like to do in my template of making a beat, I like to have a mastering chain ready. And so each time I make a beat, I don't have to just keep on having to add these things, and maybe I forget to add them in a certain order. So I just always love having these tools right here in this order every time I open my DAW, so I don't have to plug them back in. And yeah, maybe I don't maybe I mess up something like this ratio right here and this attack. Maybe I mess something up, you know, and I don't put it the right way where I wanted to, so that's why I always have this preset right here. So diving right into my mastering chain, on the very top I have my compressor. Now the compressor is just going to catch any transients that may sound like a little too harsh to the ear, maybe a little too loud that we didn't catch in our ear. So transients are just like frequencies. If you were to look in like, let's just bring a metric A, B. If you were to look right here, and these are all transients right here. But let's say one right here was just like peaking out a lot on like the high end. You're definitely gonna hear that, and it's gonna like affect the way you experience the music. It's just gonna like hit the ear a little bit too harsh. So if you didn't happen to catch that, and let's say you're mixing in a leveling process, the Fruity compressor will catch it for you. And right now I have my ratio set to 1.0. I'm sorry, 1 to 0. My attack is 30 milliseconds. My release is 100 milliseconds. And I just play with this threshold whenever I hear you'll really hear the audio just like, it'll sound a little bit more flat, but you don't want it to sound like super flat, you know. Just barely when it hits it, so that way you know the compressor's kicking in. But yeah, I just messed this threshold. And then boom. But yeah, it's different for every track, so I don't have this like preset. So let's do that as my first effect. And for my second effect, my apologies, should have preceded with this. The order of these effects really does matter. When you put an effect in, like let's say this 3D Premiere EQ, it's going to affect the track and the state that it's in after all the effects before it has been, you know, applied. Let's say you were like cutting off a lot of high end in a beat, and say there's just like a low pass EQ, you're just cutting off a lot of high end, but there's a lot of reverb before the high end EQ. It'll just it'll cut off all the high end with the reverb applied, whereas if you had a reverb after the high end, the reverb would only be applied to the beat where like the frequencies were, so like without the high end in it. So then the reverb will only be applied to like the low end of the, you know. Just thought I'd put that in there, but yeah, the order does matter in your mastering chain. And with that as well, also should have preceded with this, I always mix and master my beats in mono. After I'm all done mastering my beat, I just turn this off, boom, bam, bop. Just reset it, boom. But yeah, at this point, I'll just go like this. And so this is just a surgical sweep EQ, just make sure that any peaks that I missed, any transients that are hitting a little too harsh, sound a little too a little too harsh to the ear, just sweep through and just find an EQ. So this obviously no melody playing, my apologies. But yeah, so I'll just sweep through and find any EQs that maybe a little too harsh and just turn it down, usually just 3 dBs. Just like that. And then this one right here, so I like to increase just the low end just a little bit, increase the top end as well. You know, just kind of enhancing the frequency that I want the listener to experience the most. And then right here, right around, what is it? It says 399, awesome, 399 hertz. Right in between here, I found is just a little more a little more muddy than every other part of the frequency spectrum in a beat. Because right here you'll find a lot of sounds that'll clash, usually where the snare hits. usually out of where the beat or the melody is. Sometimes where I cut off the high end of the melody, but yeah, just a lot of sounds will just clash right around this 399. I'd say maybe like 200 to 1,000 hertz. But yeah, so I'll just bump this down. What is it? Let's see. Yeah, 1 dB. Yeah, not too much, but just to get all that clutterness, if there is any, just to get it down, so it's not really like as prominent as the other frequencies in the beat. And top clipper, I just throw this on when I turn it on, just again to catch any transients that if I did miss from the surgical EQ and from the compressor. Just like make sure that if I do increase the volume, it won't clip again, and it won't like any transients won't sound super harsh when the mix is done and the master is done. And let's say I did miss something, this pretty soft clip will just like stop that from happening. My next effect on this is my ozone imager. This is just a stereo imager, which means that like this is on mono, so at this point my beat isn't going to be as like spread out and seemingly wide as it would be if I were to take this off of mono. And the whole thing with that is that I want to get my whole mix to sound as like as wide and as spacious as possible while my beat is in mono. So when I take it off of mono, it's just going to sound that much more wide and that much more full. This is just some extra stereo imaging, some stereo width. At this point, I'll just take my beat off of mono, so I'll just reset this, boom. And then with this, I'll go ahead. I think this is at 25%, if you can see this top left corner. Is that 25%? Yeah, right there at 25%. Not too much, because again, since we made our beat like pretty wide and pretty full beforehand, I don't want to overdo it, but yeah, I'll just take it off of mono, add 25% in this ozone imager 2 plugin. And this is the width. I don't even touch the stereo size, but I just mess this width knob. And yeah, just to make our beat sound a little more full. Again, just polishing the beat, not really do anything to the sonics exactly per se. And then this one right here, same with this EQ right here. These two are actually just to mess with the levels. So I always like making my beats peak at 6 dB. And so, but if for whatever reason my beats were a little over 6 dB or under 6 dB before my car test, this is just to mess with the knobs right here, mess with the stereo gain, because I have found if I increase the volume of each sound within their preamps right here, I have found that if I think it's like 10 or 12 dB above right here in this preamp, it just starts to distort the sound. And so yeah, and instead of just doing like all these highlighted boom, just lifting this, there's nothing wrong with that, but I just feel like it's a smoother route just to go like this parametric EQ and just mess with this master volume right here, because it'll increase the volume of the whole track, so you wouldn't have to highlight everything right here. Yeah, you can just increase that. And so I just make sure that my beat is at -6 dB before that car test. And then this car test plugin, if you folks haven't heard of it, hopefully you folks have heard of the car test. This is just to replicate you going into a car and making sure your beat sounds good in a car. So this right here, it's super dope. I really just use it for my kick and my bass, just to make sure that is like seemingly sounding the same as like my reference track and sounding as punchy and as just like as thick and as hard hitting as whatever my reference track sounds like. And if it doesn't, then I'll go into the preamp, or then I'll go into like the sound and one of its effects and maybe boost the EQ. And so yeah, I'll make sure that it just hits as hard as my reference track from this car test. I believe that it's most useful for the kick and the bass. So, and then after that, I will use this EQ to raise it. So it should be around 6 dB again right now, after the previous EQ. So then I will raise this after it's all said and done to make sure that my beat peaks at -1.5 dBs. I forgot. I think it was in the mix, that gentleman who showed me this set, and he just stated how like these DSPs like Spotify and Apple Music, yeah, those DSPs will just like raise the master volume for you, I guess, like through the processing of uploading the music to the thing. I guess he mentioned it. I trust me, folks don't like, if you folks haven't seen his channel, definitely check out In The Mix. Super helpful mixing tips. But yeah, he stated how like these DSPs will just boost the master volume for you. And so with that, you kind of want to give them some room, some headroom to work with, so your whole beat doesn't clip, which is kind of like what this pretty soft clip was all about. Making sure it doesn't clip and doesn't go over 0 dB, and then it starts to sound distorted. So with that being said, he stated how you want to leave 1.5 dBs worth of room in your beat for like those DSPs to work with. So that's why literally every beat to this day, I always peak it at 1.5 dB. I'm sorry, -1.5 dB. So 1.5 decibels below 0. So I'll just raise this. So that would be 4.5 dBs that I'll raise this. Usually around that for every beat. So peak it around 1.5 dB. And then yeah, those would be all the effects that I have to master my beat. If you folks will see this, my Metric AB, this is just what I use to level my beats, which that's really all I do for the mixing process technically, because I always have all my effects preset and all my sounds, as you can see, preset in my DAW, so I don't really touch them at all. But yeah, this Metric AB is at the very bottom of my master chain, just so whenever I level, I can use this to reference. This is what I use to reference the tracks. Referencing and leveling is what I do to level my tracks. So this is at the bottom of my master chain. Nothing to do with my mastering process, but yeah, those are all the effects that I use in the order that I use to master my own beats in FL Studio. So there you have it, folks. So on my mastering chain, it's really just the compression, the EQ, the soft clipper, the stereo imager, and I have those 2 EQs with the card test in between them. But yeah, and then the Metric AB at the very bottom, but doesn't really use it on the master. I don't use it for the mastering, it's just on the bottom of my chain. But yeah, man, if you just remember to use those in that exact order, I'm sure it'll benefit you folks in your mastering process. You can use it, I use it, does me wonders. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for tuning in this video again. Appreciate you for rocking me again. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. And I will see you guys in the next video. Deuces.